gone live. I think it notifies your subscribers we've gone live too.
I think I told it could. But,
Okay.
Who knows if
Then people got notified.
Yeah.
So it's connecting. Just give it a second here. I mean, Substack is pretty darn amazing. If it's pretty amazing how it's like. So here we are. Hello, everyone. It's 5 p.m. Eastern. Thank you for joining me on my weekly show. My name is Lucy McBride, primary care doctor in Washington, D.C., who's ever fascinated with other people and thinking about how mental and physical health connect. Today on the show, I've got Debbie Weil, who is an incredible person. As we were talking before we got started, I was saying to Debbie that, it doesn't take a doctor, doesn't take a medical professional to help guide people through this messy, beautiful experience of aging, which is why I have Debbie. She's not a doctor, but she's even better. She's someone who has navigated the indignities and the wonderful elements of aging with grace and purpose and humility and, importantly, humor. So she writes this amazing Substack. It's called Bold Age.
And the B, Lucy, the B is in brackets.
The B is in brackets, importantly, because it's be old. It's not be old. It's bold, like old with bold.
Wait, it's both. Right. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Yeah.
So yeah, boldly exploring old age from the blessings to the bullshit, which is exactly the kind of stuff I like reading. So today we're going to talk with Debbie about the lessons she has learned about aging in her own personal experience, but also as a reporter, as an editor, as an author, as a podcaster, and as a woman who has gathered a large community of other people who are aging. And then she's going to ask me some questions about aging as a physician, but really it's a shared conversation between me and her and you guys listening, and hopefully we'll have a little fun along the way. So Debbie, thank you so much for joining me.
Well, thank you. And I guess people could ask questions too, but yeah. Well,
they can ask questions.
I love seeing the names pop up. You have a huge following. I'm not sure I recognize any of my names, but anyway.
So can you introduce yourself to my audience a little bit? I want my audience to get to know you a little bit because I've really enjoyed getting to know you kind of the second time around in your writer's hat.
Sure. Well, I'll just say I'm 73. And so I like to say that I have 50 years of experience as a journalist, reporter, editor. I've written one book and so forth. But in D.C., where my children grew up, Lucy was growing up, and you're about the same age as my older daughter. So I knew you as Lucy down the block, this very accomplished young woman, and now you're Dr. Lucy. So it's a really nice connection. And you were going to say, believe it or not, because it's just weird how children become grown-ups, but you practice medicine with my husband, Sam Harrington, for a while.
Oh, yeah. He is an incredible physician and thinker and writer as well. So.
Yeah, no, he's good. So we have these wonderful sort of connections. But a little bit more about me. So I did have a podcast for about 5 years, very proud of it, called Bold Age. It actually had several names. It went through several permutations. It's permutations. It started out as Gap Year for Grown-ups.
I love that.
Because when Sam and I left D.C. to kind of reinvent ourselves, he decided to retire early. In 2013, we were in our 60s. And so we wrote a blog together called Gap Year After 60. Then during the pandemic, I just called it the Gap Year blog because I figured everyone was taking a gap year. And then I got onto this Bold Age thing. And so I called it the Bold Age podcast. And then 2 years ago, exactly, it was very emotional, but I decided to stop the podcast and start writing instead. And I think, and I had a producer that I worked very closely with, a very young woman on the West Coast. She basically lived in a tent in the forest in Portland, Oregon or something, but just a really cool person, French as well. But she said to me one day in the spring of 2023, she said, Debbie, you really need to start writing again because you can't. It's wonderful when you're interviewing people, but you can't sometimes go quite as deep. So what happened was my mother died rather unexpectedly in early 2023. And so I thought about it. And so I started in June of 2023. So Like a lot of people on Substack, I really hadn't thought of myself as solely a writer. It's kind of always been what I wanted to do. Um, and it's different from being a journalist and from being a reporter. So that's what I'm doing now. It's been 2 years. I don't have thousands of subscribers, but I have, but not like you, not 10,000 or whatever, but um, I have enough that it really has formed a community. And whenever I post, I get all these really interesting, lovely comments. And I write about basically anything that appeals to me, and I sort of put it under the umbrella of bold age. But I mean, I think what I love about Substack is it really feels like I've created a community of older women. They're not all older women, my readers, but many, many are, and that's just really fun for me,
Yeah.
as a writer.
What is it that gives you the sort of energy and motivation to write about aging in particular? Like, it's called bold age for a reason. Like, what is it about aging that makes you inspired to write? Like,
That's a great question. Well, I think it's the idea that I'm trying to figure it out in real time as I go along. Because I hate to tell you, but even in your early 60s, I'm sure your listeners are of all different ages, but you're not really old. And so it's sort of like it was off there in the future. And I wanted to understand it. Like, when was I going to cross into this foreign land of old people? Because when people are your age, what, late 40s, 50, I
oh
forget
gosh,
what.
isn't that nice? I'm 52, almost 53.
Oh, 52, my God. So it's like you look at old age and you sort of look, I don't know how you wave your hand on alive, but you look way down in the future and it's like, well, that's for other people.
Right.
It's not for me. So it was sort of like forcing myself to realize I was entering this land and I wanted to make sense of it. And on Substack, it's more fun because I can make sense of it a little bit myself, but with a lot of people with their input.
What is like the most maybe there's not one thing, Debbie, but I'll ask you anyway. What's the most surprising thing about aging that you found? I think like I mean, I know you're gonna laugh because it's like, oh my God, you want to talk about the aches, you want to talk about the pains, you want to, but like maybe we could talk about the physical things that are surprising to you, but I mean more the sort of like existential, sort of like emotional elements of aging that are surprising. Like,
It's such a good question. I mean, I think the answer is discovering and rediscovering that there is sort of this essential person here. And not only does she not really change, but I'm getting to know her better. And I just be more comfortable with myself and not sort of, feel better about myself. So it's, yeah, I mean, and then I think that's what it is.
I
It's
love that because
surprising.
I love that because the beauty industry and the world of kind of anti-aging marketing, the inherent premise is that it's all going to hell. It's just a question of when and how, and how fast. And I think what I'm hearing you say is that, and maybe this is why you write, because you get to explore the idea of self-discovery like in real time when you write and then you share it with other people. But what I'm hearing you say is that in actuality, there's an opportunity to recognize that you're the same person and you get to know her in more authentic ways as you get older. Is that accurate?
It is, and I suppose it sounds very self-indulgent to be writing, to understand myself better. But I'm enough of an editor to know that, in the specific lies the universal. And when I talk about, I wrote a couple months ago about how I was really nervous about taking a trip by myself.
Mm.
I got on the plane and I went to Paris by myself for a week. I mean, I've been to Paris many, many times. I even speak French, and I was so nervous. I thought, I'll get there and I'll be so lonely and I'll get depressed. And of course, I didn't.
Mm.
It was fabulous, and I want to go again. So when I write about something like that, and I'm really, honestly revealing, then it frees up a lot of my readers to say, "Yeah, I know what you mean," or "I'm not traveling enough alone," or "I gave that up," or "I'm going to start it again," or um. No, I don't remember what your question was, but
Well, no, it's an important point. I think to travel alone, I think for some people sounds scary. It sounds scary to me. Or maybe not. I don't know if it sounds scary. It sounds I would have the same anticipatory anxiety you had. Like, I'm gonna be lonely, I'm gonna get down, I'm not gonna know what to do with myself, or worse, I'm gonna have so much time with my own inner thoughts, I'm gonna just lose it. Um, but what I'm hearing you say is that even when you're 73 as you are, you still get anxious in anticipation of things, like, you're human, and also that is it possible that because you know yourself better, it's even more possible now than it was before to be alone with yourself, like, and to actually enjoy yourself? Like, I don't know. I mean, is that too
Yeah.
quaint?
Well, that sounds great.
I mean, it's
But
maybe too quaint.
but I'm one of these people, I mean, I suppose I'm accomplished, but I don't really think about it that way, and I have a lot of self-doubt. I mean, it just, who knows why, it just is always there. But, it's that it was the surprise of getting to Paris and realizing that I could talk to everybody. Ooh, ooh, sorry about that. You fell down.
That's fine. I'm
Um,
still here.
I could sit down at a cafe and just start talking to the person next to you, and you make these connections. And in fact, when I left, Sam said, "Talk to everybody, make friends everywhere." So there was a
Well,
restaurant.
you strike me as somebody, I don't know if you were like this when you were 20 years younger, when you were 53 like I am, that maybe you're more co you strike me as someone who's comfortable in your own skin. Like, maybe that came with age, or maybe you were born like that. I don't know, Debbie. But it seems to me like a potential benefit of getting older is that, you're still gonna get anxious getting on a plane by yourself, but you have less, I don't know, inhibitions about talking to other people. I don't know. Is that
Well,
possible?
that's true. That's totally true. I mean, I really love talking to people and sort of making friends. And one thing I hear over and over is, if I'm allowed to swear on,
Oh,
is
I mean,
I don't,
by all
like
means.
I don't give a shit anymore. I don't give a shit about this or this or this, and that a lot of older women are just being really upfront about saying that. I don't care exactly what I look like. I don't want to wear makeup. I'm not going to do things that people ask me to do that I don't want to do, and things like that. I mean, I'm it's sort of like that, but I also am married and I have a husband, so I have to negotiate a lot of things with
Right,
him.
marriage is basically one big negotiation after the next, isn't it? No. But yeah, what I hear you saying is that there's like there's a freedom that comes with not being burdened with, like, self-criticism, self-judgment. I mean, I'm only 53, I feel like I'm pretty young, but, like, I do feel like with age comes less worry about, what other people think of you, and, like, I don't I used to give away so much power to other people, their opinions of me, and need to be liked, and I mean, it's really nice to be liked, but I don't need to be liked. I don't need to be liked. Like, I like myself enough. I mean, I
Yeah.
like being liked. I'm not against being liked. I like myself enough, and I can spend time alone and have a pretty good time. I also am pretty social. But I think being unburdened by the inner self-critic and the negative self-talk can be a really wonderful part of aging, and actually, I talk with patients about this all the time,
Mm,
and to the extent that it relates to your health, right? Because so many people's health is informed by, I
mm,
mean, I would argue that everyone's health is informed by their thoughts and their feelings, because their thoughts and their feelings translate into the behaviors. So, for example, if you have a negative self-image, if you're a critic and there's this constant chatter internally about you should do this, you should do that, or don't do this or don't do that, it breeds a lot of shame and self-doubt,
mm,
and it can drive people to, you know, drink too much alcohol, binge eat,
mhm, mm.
engage in self-sabotaging behaviors, um, engage in denial, right? Like, not see your doctor, or, have relationships that aren't healthy. And of course, we know that relationships and healthy relationships are part of being healthy in general. So, um, sometimes you can unlock someone's kind of health kind of ecosystem by just allowing them to practice a little self-compassion, and first to examine their own internal landscape, which may involve, negative self-talk, which I do think can get better with age if you give yourself permission to look inside. I didn't do that when I was 20. I was just kind of like, you're right. I didn't do that when I was 30. But I think with age, you kind of are forced to look inside. I think we get enough tread on the tires that you have to, whether it's through grief or loss or major changes in your life, or, you know, at some point you have to kind of look inside. And without doing that, I think it's kind of a boring life and maybe less healthy as well. I don't know.
Well, I've also been pretty upfront with my readers that even though I'm in my early 70s, my parents died very recently in their
Mm.
early 90s. They were only
Wow.
20 years older than me. And
Wow.
that unlocked a bunch of stuff that I really wanted to try and think about because, as everyone says politely, it was I had a complicated relationship with my parents. They were very bossy, et cetera, et cetera. So it is a little bit like, wow, I mean, they're not both of them are not here anymore. And now there's sort of this reordering. And I've been pretty upfront about that. So
Have you talked about that, like, in your writings about
oh,
the
yeah. Oh, yeah.
relationship
I
with
have,
your parents?
I
Oh,
absolutely, I have. Those are for my paid subscribers so that it's as of a paywall. So it's a fewer people reading it. But,
well, it's a vulnerable subject, I would imagine, too.
well, a lot of people have, interestingly, similar experiences. And also grief. I just think at this age, I mean, there's a number of women on Substack, some of them are marvelous writers who are widows. And that's another topic. How will I cope if my husband dies? And I wrote a whole thing about that, interviewing someone that actually, Sarah Brown. And
Oh.
it was so, so, so interesting because, she's such an accomplished person. And she was really upfront. She said, I just don't know how I'll cope. She said, I don't, he pays the bills and I don't know how to do this and that. Um, so I try, I have to I'm a little journalistic about it, kind of like you are, I suppose, where I'm thinking about kind of what are people really thinking about? What do they really care about? And usually I care about it too. So that works out.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I mean, your writing is a little bit like mine. It's voicey, and you're not afraid to share things about yourself, um, because, like, for one thing, people often assume doctors are like, I mean, I don't know if this is true anymore, but, like, people historically, maybe they think doctors are all just, like, obnoxious, like, you know,
No, no,
well,
no, no.
like,
That's
but historically, people have thought about doctors that we, like, floss after every meal and, exercise and hydrate, 8 glasses of water a day and don't
right.
drink and don't use swear words, and that is absolutely all not true. Like, we are human too. In fact, our humanity and our flaws, I think, are what make us able to relate to other people. And if you are a doctor who pretends that you are morally superior or have some, like, moral high ground over your patients, then you really are in the wrong profession. But my point is that, um yeah, I think being human and being accessible and relatable to other people is, like, first of all, who I am, and then secondly, I find that it resonates with my readers. Like, if I write about a personal experience, people really like it. Like, sometimes I've been really vulnerable and I'm like, I hit send and I publish it and I'm like, cringe, 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 and then people inevitably like it. And if I write something that's more dry,
Yeah, yeah,
people like it maybe, but it's, if I write about cholesterol as an inflammatory process and not a plumbing process, like, people like that. But I like to sprinkle in some, like, humanity because, we're people too, right?
well, I'll
Um,
say it makes it just so much more palatable. And since I've also been an editor, I was a book coach for nonfiction book coach for a while, an editor. So I'm always very aware of, and you do this so well. You bring in some issue or maybe an uncertainty or something, and then you segue into whatever it is, and it basically makes you more credible and more human.
well, I
Um,
never liked doctors who, like, preached from a pulpit, right? Like, who believes the doctor who says, you know, "You really oughta lose weight"? I mean, what patient of mine who's overweight doesn't already know that or doesn't know about the benefits of broccoli or the harms of,
yeah.
drinking too much alcohol. So, yeah, it's relatability, and anyway, so I wanna get back to some questions about aging for you, Debbie. Like, I asked you what the most surprising thing about aging was, and it sounded like, I don't wanna put words in your mouth, but it sounds like you said that the most surprising thing for you, was, like, realizing you're the same person and then getting to know yourself better?
I did, but I have to say, getting to know myself better seems to be a big project.
Well, right, I mean, you're never done,
Basically,
you're never done.
so I really, so that's, I mean, I have to say, maybe the real thing is the surprising is that I'm, getting to like myself better. I just went to this really cool workshop that in the New Mexico desert, and with 20 other participants. And one person said, it was all older people kind of going through the transition of maybe finishing a career at 60 and starting something else. And one participant said he'd been trying to absorb this idea that he didn't have to be important anymore. He didn't even have to be productive.
Mm.
So I just can't. The important is fine. I'm not important. I don't need to be important. But the productive thing is very hard for me to put aside. So maybe that's a surprise, is I still feel ambitious and like, I committed to doing the Bold Age newsletter, and I publish every Friday. And then sometimes I say to myself, God, what are you doing, Debbie? I mean, you're really spending a lot of time on this. You're putting a lot of psychic energy in it. Some things are hard to write. And you're in your 70s. I mean, why are you doing that? I don't know. I feel driven to do that. So,
sounds like you feel called to do it and driven to do it. That it's more. It's an authentic drive. Like, I mean, if I were your therapist, I'd be like, is there anything wrong with that? Like, what's the downside? Is Sam saying, oh my God, you're spending the entire week writing and you can't hang out with me, or like you have to cancel plans? So you writing, like, is there some unintended consequences? Or is it just that you like the routine, you like the cadence, and you like relating to your audience?
well, I like the structure and I like having a deadline. Otherwise, I would never do anything.
Right.
So this really works for me. Having been a journalist and having been the kind of person who will procrastinate forever about writing something. Sam is sort of supportive about my Substack, but he's also, he's on the list, of course. And I say, well, did you read that one? He says, no, but maybe I'll get to it. And I always think, it's so important to me. Why don't you read it? But
And what are the things that resonate? What are the things that surprise you, or maybe don't surprise you, that when you write about the various topics you write about regarding aging, like what are the things that you find resonate with your readers the most? Like sometimes I'll put out a topic on my Substack and people go crazy over it. I'm like, God, I never would have predicted that. And then sometimes I'll put out like a piece of work that I think is so great and it's just sort of crickets. Like what are the things that people really, really resonate with? Like what are the subjects? What is the tone? What's on the brain of people who are reading about aging?
well, I mean, honestly, it's when I'm more vulnerable.
Yeah.
So we went skiing this past Christmas in Japan, if you can stand it, with my son and his wife and their kids, our grandchildren. And I was a very good skier a number of years ago, and this time I could barely ski. I would fall over putting my skis on. I mean, it was so frustrating and so humbling. So vulnerability of it's a big topic with people. Things that you used to be able to do and now you can't, or a bad hip, or I've had a lot of trouble with my eyesight, and I have terrible eyesight, but I did just have cataract surgery, and so it's better. Frankly, anytime I admit to something like that, physical stuff that's difficult, people really, really relate. And I'm in generally pretty good condition, but I'm also weaker, and that's the bullshit.
Yeah, the
I mean,
bullshit is
sort of
part of
being,
aging. It's the bullshit. I think it makes sense to me that people relate to it. I think we live in an epidemic of loneliness and disconnection. I think people are looking for community, and they're looking for people who are authentic and who admit vulnerabilities and who do it with the kind of finesse and humor that you do in your writing. Um, and also like just to feel like you're being seen in someone else's story. Like, I mean, there's nothing
yeah.
more, right? To feel like, oh, that me too, right? Like, it's just a nice thing. When I had this neck situation in February of 24, and where I did what you're not supposed to do, which is ignore it for a long time. And then I had this neck pain and I was like, oh, I'll just ignore it, right? Like that's the best thing to do. And then I started taking fistfuls of Advil, and then my stomach started hurting and I was like bruising because I was taking so much Advil. And then I was like, oh, you know what I'll do? I'll go to a physical therapist. I'll just go right to the treatment, right? I'll just go right. So I went to a physical therapist, and the physical therapist is like, this is like more than I can handle. This is not just a physical therapy problem. I'm like, oh, sure it is. Come on. So then I ordered this gizmo on Amazon to try to like stretch my neck out. Like literally, I'm like Googling like what to do about neck pain. I mean, this is ridiculous. This is what I do all day long in my professional life. And finally, my friend who's an orthopedic surgeon, we were having dinner as couples, and he was like, "You gotta get an MRI." Like he's like, "I think you're like numb in your fingers. Get an MRI." Anyway, I have this disc that's bulging. It's sitting on the nerve root here. Like I have a weak in my left arm. I didn't even notice it because I'm right-handed. So patients loved my readers loved that because I was like, do as I say, not as I do, right? Like I am the worst patient. I ignore my symptoms. I self-medicate. I Google. And then I poo-poo the advice of somebody who I trust until the car is broken down on the side of the road. Anyway, that was fun to write about, and I think it is true that people like, being understood and feeling seen and feeling heard. And I think in part because we live in this era of disconnection and people don't, particularly post-pandemic, like I don't see people like I used to. My kids are old enough that we don't get together on the soccer fields and
Yeah.
PTA meetings or whatever, back to school nights. And I think it's nice to cultivate a community where you can be relatable and people write back. And it's just, I've loved this community. And it sounds like you built the same kind of community on your Substack.
I'm trying. I mean, I think it's growing. And I mean, I'm one of these people that always thinks a little bit of doctors as gods, all that you went through to train and then having life and death responsibility. And so when a person like that, meaning like you, admits to this kind of not very clear thinking, it's really, really helpful. I also have had this very stiff neck problem. That was driving me crazy, and I wrote about it, and a lot of people had things to say. And I went to a massage guy. He was great, and then he said, "Well, why don't you see my physical therapist?" No, he was a no, not he was a
Physiatrist?
chiropractor.
Oh, chiropractor, yes.
Chiropractor. So I went to the chiropractor. He did one thing, pulling my neck, and then I got up, and I said, "Well, so can I get rid of this? And what should I do?" And he said, "I don't know." He said, It was so weird. Instead of saying, "You need to come back for 10 more sessions," he said, "I don't know. I don't think you really can fix this. And then you'll love this." So I did nothing. I did go to the physical therapist once, got a few exercises. I didn't do the exercises. I didn't think about it. 3 or 4 months went by, and it just felt better.
Well, sometimes things get better on their own. I mean, the body has an amazing ability to heal on its own, right? Like sometimes we don't need to react to everything and medicalize things. We just need to give it time. But I think the question is always for my patients and for myself, apparently, is like knowing when you need help and knowing when you don't, right? It's like knowing when to hold them and knowing when to fold them. And that's probably the hardest part about being a patient or being mortal, right? It's like knowing when you need to ask for help and knowing when you have the tools internally to handle it.
But I do have a question for you
Oh,
because
please.
there's a whole bunch of Dr. So and so's on Substack with all different kinds of advice. And so
Yeah.
one of my questions is, how do I know who to trust, who to believe? And I have to say, you're definitely one of them. I'm married to a physician who's very skeptical about living to 100 and taking a lot of supplements. And so I've sort of internalized a lot of that. But I'm just curious, who do you, what do
It's
you
a
do
really
about
good
that?
question. It's a really good question. I get this question all the time from readers because I think my patients don't ask me because I think I would assume they trust me or else they wouldn't be coming back.
Right.
But so I think we live in an era where trust is, at its lowest in public health and, institutions and frankly in doctors. And I think part of it is because the medical system in this country is so broken
Mm.
through no fault of doctors. I mean, the system is not geared to care for patients in a meaningful whole person way. It's also not geared for doctors to be able to do the things they need to do to care for patients, particularly in primary care. So primary care ideally and it should be incarnated is where primary care should be a hub for problem solving. It should be a home where mental and physical and behavioral health meet, where your primary care doctor knows not just your diagnoses, but knows your name, knows the sort of your life situation and circumstances, understands your risk tolerance, your medical history, and can kind of meet you where you are when it comes to making medical decisions. Like, that's the way primary care is supposed to be. That's what I thought I was going into when I decided to be a primary care doctor. But in this country, the system is not designed for primary care doctors to do that. It's designed for primary care doctors to be referral mills and write prescriptions and referrals and to be just, cogs in a wheel. 5%, only 5% of healthcare spending is spent on primary care. 95% is on hospitalizations and,
Mm.
disease control, so damage control. If we were to reinvent healthcare, you'd never invent a system the way we do. It's made it so that medicine is transactional. It's not relationship based. So the reason why I think people don't trust doctors like they used to, and why they're so starved for information, is because the average person has 7 minutes with their doctor, and 80 million Americans don't have a doctor. So if you have 7 minutes with your doctor and your doctor's hand is on the doorknob, ready to go to the next patient, and they don't even really know your name, they don't know the context of your life.
Mm.
They're saying like exercise more, eat less, see you next year, here's some lab results, and they treat you as a number, not a person. They treat you as a set of lab test results and not a human being. They treat you as a bag of organs and not an integrated set of right. Then of course you're not going to trust that person, even if they have the best resume and they've won all these awards. You're not going to trust that person because trust is born out of authentic, listening and understanding.
Well, wait,
So
so
then
hold on.
what happens is when you have a medical system that's broken, like it is, you give birth to the wellness industry, and the wellness industry is
Right,
trying to
right.
meet the moment and make up for the failures of the medical system, which it does in some ways. But guess what? You can meditate and do yoga and cleanse and optimize and track your steps all day long and still get pancreatic cancer. You
I know.
can, listen to a guru on a podcast and still be depressed, right? Like, so it's my public service announcement, which is going to sound obvious, which is that we need to reinvent healthcare in this country where primary care is centered, where everyone has unfettered access to a primary care doctor, not only because it's the right thing to do, but because it saves money and it improves patient outcomes. And that's going to happen. I think Silicon Valley thinks that it can do it without doctors, that tech and AI is going to do it, but you actually
Yeah,
need doctors.
I wanted to
So
ask you
anyway,
about
I
that.
have a whole editorial about that. Like, we could talk about it separate time. But I'm trying to answer your question. Why, who to trust? I think it's hard.
Exactly. And also not just, I don't mean just your doctor, but I mean this just incredible onslaught of information and, if I'm allowed to say it, disinformation.
Oh, sure.
And a lot of it is, I mean, if you're on Substack, you might be running into it. And so I
Oh, yeah.
find myself actually evaluating, let's see, do I believe this person, or this person is literally spreading
Yeah, I mean,
misinformation?
I don't
And so how does that, do you, like, what should we be, quote, reading? Because people do like to read about stuff. Or who should we trust? Or what's her name? Gretchen Rubin, or I forget her name, but
Rachel Rubin, or like the urologist, you mean?
oh, yeah. No, I don't mean her, but there's a Washington Post. I think she was at the Times. Now she writes sort of a health column. Gretchen, I think, something health column for the Washington Post, maybe. And I always
See,
figure, well,
I think I can't tell you, like, here's who to trust. I would say the people I would tend to trust are people who are credentialed in the field that they are talking about, right? Like, I wouldn't trust a chiropractor to do weight management, right? I wouldn't trust an internal medicine doctor, primary care doctor, to tell you, whether or not you need shoulder replacement or shoulder,
yeah,
arthroscopic surgery, right? Like, know thyself, like, be credentialed in the field in which you are giving advice. I would also, this is going to sound obvious, but the people I trust are the people who have humility about what they don't know, who are able to say, I don't know, but I'll get back to you, who don't claim to have expertise in every single
yeah,
area that's ironclad. I trust people who are collaborative and who acknowledge that we don't, that even if you are an expert in the field, that we don't know everything, that medicine and science are practices and they're iterative. I trust people who aren't selling products. Like, I think it's not a crime to sell products, but I also think it's a little bit of a red flag for me if you're selling.
Oh, yeah.
Like if I start selling
Definitely.
like the McBride set of vitamins for like for longevity, like the words anti-aging, longevity, and the words optimization are like fingernails on a chalkboard to me because
But to you, because remember, they're
yes,
not. To some people, it's just like,
well,
that's
yeah,
what I want.
yeah. I mean, well, they're marketing terms, right? Anti-aging, optimization, longevity; those are marketing terms, right? Um, Longevity isn't actually a goal if your quality of life is terrible, right? Like I one of my favorite, this may sound strange, conversation to have with a patient is when we're talking end of life. We're talking about what are we
Mm.
going to do with the next 6 months. Longevity isn't necessarily the goal if your quality of life is crappy and you're on a chemotherapeutic drug that is causing you to have nausea and vomiting and you can't go to your grandson's baseball games. Like we need to be realistic about mortality is a universal phenomenon. Just like we're born, we all die. And the doctor's job is not to prolong life when it's not what the patient wants. It's
Yeah.
actually to meet the moment. And so I think this whole idea of longevity misses the mark. It misses the reality of the situation, which is that what people want in their life is quality. They want quantity, but they want quality and they want a sense of agency over their everyday life to the extent that's possible. And the degree to which some of these influencers think we have control is ridiculous. Like,
Well, yeah, and then so the terms that I've been using are health span versus lifespan, and I read a little bit on the research. So interestingly, health lifespan is now longer
yeah,
for most people, certainly most people in the U.S. Health span is not,
I
which
mean,
is really interesting. Because, like, what's the point of getting? I mean, like, I'm thinking, okay, 20 more years, I'll be 93. But if I'm in as bad shape as my parents were, and they were very active people, I'm thinking that's not so great. So I do try and talk about that, and I do try and address death and
yeah,
dying. I mean, I can always do it more, I think, because that's part of sort of how you think of yourself as old. I mean, am I thinking about this is my last chapter? What does it mean? What can I accomplish? And it's like you literally like almost see the hard stop.
right.
Although it's really really hard to do that for yourself.
Of course it
So
is. Of course it is.
you can look at another old person that have been over and walking down the street, and I can say, man, they're getting close. But no,
Well,
I was kind of asking you what you.
thinking about dying and thinking about your North Star is another way to think about living,
Mhm,
right? So
I agree.
it's a way of conceptualizing, okay, were I to have a conversation where I have 6 months to live, what would my North Star be? Well, take that conversation and bring it to yourself today when you don't have only 6 months to live. Because ultimately, what is health? Health is not just about having a nice cholesterol level or a perfect body weight or a certain number of steps or a certain amount of protein with every meal. Health is about understanding where you have control, where you don't have control, having trusted guides, and it's also about how you feel, how you inhabit your body and mind every day. It's a process. Um, but I think in medicine, we've conceptualized health as a set of metrics
Well, yeah,
and a certain like and living longer at all costs.
I mean, I was actually going to ask you about that. Like, so what is on my mind when it comes to health?
Yes, please.
Um, well, I've gained weight around my middle in the last year or so, and it just drives me crazy. And I'm like, oh, I got to lose these 5 pounds. And then I thought, nah, you know what? But maybe I'm just going to go to the gym more and do some more weights and concentrating on getting stronger. So there's a lot of questions, I think, that because your body changes in ways that you like, whoa, I wasn't expecting that. Um, so that's one thing
Right.
that I fret over.
Yeah,
That
people fretting about weight and particularly women fretting about their weight, their middle is something I would talk about with people every day. And there's no easy solution. I mean, it comes out and the question is why does it matter? Right? So it matters because
well, because you have to look at it in the mirror.
well, you have to look at it, and there's that. There's the sort of like moral injury, right? But then there's also the metabolic sluggishness that it sometimes reflects. In other words,
I know, like
weight in your middle can often mean you have more visceral fat, which is not good for your cardiovascular health. So, when you have more middle weight, I'm sure you're getting your cholesterol checked and your lipoprotein little a checked and your blood pressure checked and your hemoglobin A1C, your blood sugar, which is the measure of your average, blood sugar over the last 90 days, which then tells us about your metabolic efficiency. So for people who have extra belly weight, whose metabolic markers are normal, you might just not look at it. But if you have metabolic insufficiency, then it's reasonable to want to, manage that belly weight with a lower carbohydrate diet, more strength exercises. And then these GLP-1 medications, I'm not recommending this to you at all.
Wait,
I'm not at
hold on.
all. I'm not at all. But they are pretty amazing.
Wait, I want to ask you about that, and I want to ask you about ChatGPT.
Ooh,
Because
great questions. Yes.
I want to know if you use it. I use it all the time rather than asking my husband. I'll say, I just ask it constantly, like,
Oh,
my
yeah.
neck hurts, what could it be? Or, you have to ask the question in the right way.
Yep.
So, and I'm always skeptical with the answer. But I actually do use it, and I use it for everyday life. Like, how do I get from here to here in Japan, or a health question? Or, I had a rash on my leg, and, what do you So
Well,
I'm doing that, and that's a
ChatGPT
little
I think
what?
ChatGPT is great, but actually even better than ChatGPT for medical stuff is Open Evidence, which just came out.
Oh, I have to write that down.
It's
Okay,
called Open Evidence.
all right.
Um, and I'm not saying it's going to replace doctors, but let's acknowledge that it's hard to get in with a primary care doctor who has any time, who's going to listen to you and take your insurance. So, it's better than nothing. And a lot of people got nothing. But even if you even if you do have a doctor, it can be a nice sort of first pass.
Yeah,
Again, I'm not
it's just
recommending ChatGPT replace your doctor. I'm just saying,
no, no, I'm not saying that, but it's no.
but
What do you?
open evidence is pretty
Okay,
amazing. It's free right now, and it's connected to a massive database of medical evidence, including all articles from the Journal of the American Medical Association and the New England Journal of Medicine. It's pretty amazing. It's
I
pretty
can't wait
amazing.
to check that out.
Yeah. I mean,
Um,
AI is coming for healthcare. Whether healthcare is ready for AI is another
oh,
story.
I
But
know. Well, it's also a huge topic amongst the writers on Substack,
oh yeah, sure, sure.
and I don't use it for writing. I used it once to help me edit something, and it was the most horrible experience because I was totally sucked in, and I couldn't remember what I'd written, what they'd written. But it's good for organizing things, or, here's my to-do list. I'm feeling overwhelmed. Prioritize this for me.
It's
But
good
I
to
want to ask you,
it's good to get you if you're stuck on a task, it's good to
yeah.
yeah.
But I want to ask you what the GLP, is that what it is?
The
Um,
GLP-1 medicines like
I
Ozempic
mean,
and Wegovy.
everyone I know is talking about them. I am always very skeptical of things. I'm not overweight enough, so I wouldn't do it because I'm always sort of thinking logically. If you take it, then you kind of have to keep taking it. And people don't.
You don't have to.
But how do you, if you wean off, aren't you just going to start eating again? So that people have a lot of questions about
Yeah, so let's talk
that.
about the GLP-1s. The GLP-1s are, at the risk of sounding like I'm owned by Novo Nordisk or Eli Lilly, which I'm not, the GLP-1 medications are arguably the most sophisticated technology or medical technology we've had, I mean, in my lifetime. Um, we've had the weight loss drugs on the market since the beginning of time that are just basically cocaine in a tablet, right? They were so bad. Those of fen and all these sort of diet drugs, which did a lot of harm to people's hearts. The GLP-1 medications have a very sophisticated mechanism of action. They do a couple things. One is they improve insulin's efficiency. So they help your insulin, which is
Hmm.
a protein made in your pancreas that digests carbohydrates. It works more efficiently. Number two, it helps suppress appetite. Number three, it helps with something called food noise, which you've probably heard about. Food noise meaning the sort of ruminative sort of
Hmm.
thinking about food that a lot of people have and they don't know they have until it's diminished. For a lot of my patients who have struggled with overweight or obesity for decades, they didn't realize how much mental math and shame and sort of remorse and thinking
Yeah.
about food that was going on in the background as noise until they were on a GLP-1 medication. So, and then they slow digestion. So they, for the right person, they're pretty extraordinary. I don't tell every patient who has a higher than is ideal BMI to be on GLP-1 medications. But I also think that the writings, the sort of the narratives out there in the public square are pretty hyperbolic and inaccurate. So it is not true that everybody who stops their GLP-1 after they've successfully lost 10, 20, 30 pounds is going to inevitably gain the weight back. They don't. First of all, if you're being followed by a physician who understands how these medications work and they're helping you manage your relationship with food and manage the potential side effects, and you're successful getting your weight off, and the doctor knows that you can taper the medication, you taper it gradually. I'm finding that patients are able to keep weight off. Are they able to keep all of the weight off forever? Well, first of all, it's too early to tell. But secondly, the behavioral changes that come out of the experience of using Ozempic are lasting. So I have so many patients who have used Ozempic or Zepbound, Wegovy, Mounjaro, who, like I said, didn't realize that they were stress eating or emotionally eating
That's so
until they
interesting.
weren't, who didn't realize that the mental math about food was causing them to restrict calories during the day. So many people I see have gained weight and have a hard time losing weight because they're not eating enough in the daytime. So if you don't eat enough in the daytime, your metabolism tends to slow. This is a common habit for people, and a common reason people gain weight is because they eat, a decent breakfast, kind of crappy or no lunch, and then, big dinner, glass of wine, bowl of ice cream. They go to bed, they're not hungry the next morning, and they do it all over again.
Right.
The problem with Ozempic is if you do that, you feel nauseated because the medicine without food makes people feel nauseated. So what it allows people to do, I'm finding this all the time, is when people are on Ozempic, they're able to actually liberalize their diet because they aren't afraid of gaining weight because they're not gaining weight. So they'll eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner, sometimes for the first time in decades. So what's cool is to see my patients who've really been in a kind of like chronic restriction during the day finally feed their bodies, nourish their bodies in the way that is medically, hormonally, emotionally the most satisfying. A good breakfast with protein, fiber, healthy fats, a good lunch, protein, fiber, healthy fats, a good dinner, less alcohol, and they can eat more. And their weight is coming down. And then when they gradually go off the medication, tapering it appropriately, those habits have been ingrained because they realize they don't have to be afraid of eating. In fact, the fear of eating too much was the problem in the first place. Does that make sense?
It does. And I'm just curious, since we were talking about old age, are you doing this with some of your older patients too?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, at any age. I mean, again, it's not a panacea. There are real side effects. Most obviously like the nausea if you don't eat enough, nausea if you have too much spicy or citrus or acidic foods, constipation. But the side effects can be mitigated with, hydration and eating enough and, by adjusting the dose appropriately or spacing out the doses. So if you have someone who's experienced prescribing it and you have the right candidate, it can be a very successful experiment. And are there patients who need to be on it forever? Absolutely. I mean, I have patients who, they just have fixed metabolic insufficiency. They've exercised, they're eating healthy, they just have metabolic insufficiency or type 2 diabetes that has nothing to do with behaviors, has nothing to do with not eating enough, right? So like they just need to be on it for life, just like you and I need glasses. Like they need it. And thank God this medication exists because, type 2 diabetes and cardiovascular health, or type 2 diabetes and cardiovascular disease are, you know, extremely common and now much more modifiable than they were in the past with the help of these medicines as appropriate.
I'm looking at the time and feeling like I've taken up much too
No,
much
no,
time.
I could talk about the horrors of the medical system, GLP-1s, death and dying, aging all day long. What other questions do you have for me, or what have I not asked you, Debbie Weil, about?
There is one thing.
Please.
I am starting the No Guilt Bold Women Book Club.
Oh my gosh.
Now, you don't need to be a bold woman. It's bold women because the women we're reading, the authors, are older, really good writers, and it starts a week from today.
Oh my gosh. Wait, say this again. You're starting a book club for bold women. starting a week from today.
Well,
So
it's not for bold women. So it's called No Guilt, because if you don't finish the book, that I hate it. I've been in book clubs. I was in book club, and they make you feel so guilty. Forget
right.
it. It's the No Guilt Bold Women Book Club. So
I love it.
we're reading, and this comes back to what am I interested in? What are my readers interested in? Memoirs, basically by older women that are really, really good. So the first one we're reading is by a Substack writer who's very popular. Her name is Abigail Thomas.
Okay.
She writes a Substack. I forget what the name of it is. She writes very short, sort of short vignette type things. She's in her 80s. She's a New York Times bestselling writer. She's written a bunch of books, but now she writes on Substack. She has a huge following, but she does have a new book out. It's
Oh,
called it's called Still Life at 80. Get it? Or Still Life
oh my
at
gosh.
80.
I love her
So
already.
it's very, very readable, and she's a beautiful writer. So we're going to start with that, and she's going to come on
Oh
my Zoom so that whoever comes can ask her questions. So,
my gosh,
and
that is so much fun. And so how would someone who's listening here join your book club, your no guilt, bold?
I'm so glad you asked. So, well, first of all, I'm looking. I think there's some way you can subscribe to my. You can subscribe
Yes,
free.
everyone needs to subscribe to Debbie's Substack because
Yeah, I
it's
think
so
it's
fun
up
to read.
there. I don't know how it works, but you can subscribe. However, this is going to be a lovely perk for my paid subscribers. So you have to
Great.
become a paid subscriber. But I'll tell you a secret, which is that there's something I've sent an email out today to my free subscribers, offering them a deal on, for a year. So if you sign up now ish, when am I going to do it? I think on Monday, I'll send that email out. It only goes to my free subscribers, and
Oh my gosh, fun.
they'll be like, so. I mean, a lot of people charge a lot for their Substacks, and I don't really. So it's a deal on a deal kind of thing. But so that was, you know,
That is
um,
fun. And so you're gonna read this book together. So everyone's gonna, go out in their regular lives,
well,
read the book, and then come together and talk
yeah.
to the writer?
Well, I mean, I don't care whether people actually read it or not, but they probably this is not the right version of it, but this is an early version of the book. I get the idea is that you read it, or at least read part of it before we meet, and then I'll give an introduction, maybe sort of orient us a little bit, and what I want to do is talk to the writer and have everyone listening. Everyone attending can ask questions, and I'm interested in the writer's life as well as their writing, because I love talking about the craft of writing or getting people to think about it, or it's just so fascinating, this what Substack kind of provides for us. It's this place to write nonfiction essays and to figure out how to do that, and she does it so well. She's a lot of fun. She's completely self-deprecating. She's got a great sense of humor. I mean, I think she swears and stuff. So
Oh, that is
that'll
great.
be the first meeting of it's a Zoom, basically. So it's
I'm so glad you brought that up, Debbie. That sounds so much fun. I'm actually super interested in it myself, and I might grab my mom and see if she was interested. She just had a big birthday,
oh,
akin to the one you just mentioned, and this author. So, is this a new book this woman published?
it came out a year ago, and without getting too sort of inside baseball about the world of publishing, it was originally published by a very small press, and then I think Scribner's picked it up and reissued it with a nicer cover. I'm sorry, this is the old cover, so
Okay, okay,
the new
got it.
cover is better. Um, so it's new, yeah, it's new-ish, and
Great.
she's just. I mean, I've seen her once in the flesh at the Woodstock, New York Book Festival, and she was hilarious. And I mean, when we're down in New Haven and not in Maine, where I am today, I mean, I could drive to see her, which I'd sort of secretly like to do. So we'll see.
Oh my gosh, isn't that fun? That is fun. It's fun to hear you so excited about it too.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know, I've been wanting to do something where we
And
can
there's
talk to.
something beautiful. I mean, I think you would agree about women celebrating other women's work and women, just remaining curious about each other's lives. I mean, that's just like the best.
But I mean,
Um,
but you can, it's quote open to all. There's absolutely no reason that a man who's interested in good memoirs couldn't attend. So I'm not making it. It's like it's only for women. I struggle
right,
with that a little bit, by the way. I don't
right.
know about you, but in terms of my audience, um, I think it's women who are most interested. But I find it really hard to say, I'm only interested in women. I only write for women. I don't. I think I write to everybody, but anyway.
Same. I read a lot about menopause and that kind of thing, and I think the guys just tune it out. But but I mean, they should know about. They need to know about menopause just as
I know.
much
And
as.
by the way, I work. I also have an editor who's absolutely marvelous, and she said, "Be sure to ask a question about menopause," which I didn't because
Oh,
it's not top of mind for me because I'm beyond it. But so anyway, I didn't ask you enough about that. But you know
that's
what? I
okay.
have to tell you, I have some lasagna in the oven.
Oh my gosh, you've got to go. I have to go home and
I got to
walk the
take it out.
dog. And Debbie, it's been delightful talking to you. I could talk to you for hours and hours and hours. When you're in DC, please come and look me up.
I will. And
Um,
by the way, I'm so excited about your book. So
oh,
that
thank you. It's coming out next May with Simon and
that's
Schuster.
incredible. So
Yeah,
to be continued on
to be
that.
continued. I'll do lots of promo about that closer to the time. Right now, I'm just trying to get my final draft into the copy editors by August.
Ah,
Yeah.
okay.
Um,
All right, Lucy, thank you so
Thank
much
you
for having me.
for everything you do, and we'll be in touch. Thanks for
Okay.
joining us, everybody. Bye bye.